Are we live?
And we are live, officially. Hello, everyone. I am American Populist, and today I'm joined by Buckeye Politics. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Good. I just got off a hard day at work. But today we will be discussing the suburbs, and if we have time, maybe the military or Afghanistan, whichever of the two we want to talk about. But we will go ahead and get into our topic without any further delay. Thank you for sharing your background.
Yeah, I just pulled it up for a second, but I closed it.
That's fine. It's fine.
I don't think anyone's watching though.
Yeah, we
Should
had
we
people
wait a few
watching.
seconds for people to get in?
Yeah, let's wait a couple minutes.
All right.
Yeah, sometimes StreamYard doesn't show that people are watching. I'm gonna check though.
Yeah, I'm on YouTube and there's no one in the chat and it says no one's waiting or watching. So,
I had
American Seagull
people.
Predictions is in the chat. So,
Okay, we got people joining. All right.
all right.
Gwinnett County is voting for evil.
You're
It
not
is. It's in
wrong.
the thumbnail. All right, but let me discuss. Let's get into the history of the suburbs before I get sidetracked again. So the suburbs are a conservative idea in the obsession and birth of them. As we know, the quintessential idea of America is a suburban house with a white picket fence in the background, with a good job, great schools, great opportunity for families. Is the quintessential idea for the American dream. Of course, that dream is dead, but
We have to
the
talk about
suburbans
that.
are the backdrop. The suburbs are the backdrop for that dream, and they always have been for a long time. I would say since the 50s, if you would agree with that.
No, I would. Yeah, because when you think of even the 50s or just America in general, like you said, it's that suburban house with a white picket fence, and that all kind of started in the 50s because people would work in the big cities, but a lot of them didn't necessarily like maybe the living conditions. So it was easy because cars were now a thing to commute into your job in the big city, and people kind of move out and live further apart. So
True, true. So let's get into some of the political history of the suburbs. Other early examples of the suburbs date as early as 1920 and as late as the 1800s in, I'm sure I'm going to butcher this name, Leatt Park, New Jersey, created in 1853. Henry Ford was a big reason for why the suburbs caught on as they did and boomed during post-World War and economics, as his manufacturing cars reduced cost, improved infrastructure and transportation for most people for communication and commute times for their work and supporting their families. And the government was also another major player that encouraged movement out of the city centers. Federal legislation made it cheaper to construct new homes outside the urban areas, and loans and subsidies were usually provided to those who were usually willing to move to a new planned suburb, usually wealthier white families. In the 1930s, the United States Congress created the FHA in order to provide programs to insure mortgages as a result of the Great Depression. The rapid growth of the suburbia characterized the post World War II era for three chief reasons. Number one, the economic boom following World War II and the United States running high on its economic newfound power. After the post World War II economy wore off, the need for housing the returning veterans and thus resulting in the baby boomer generation also created brand new customers for the economy and people to sell houses to, obviously. And another reason for why the suburbs grew, and a controversial one, I might add, is whites fleeing the segregation of the urban areas brought on by civil rights movements, also known as white flight. Derogatory, I'd add. In current trends, the suburbs have become fairly elitist in their sense, fairly non working class anymore as they used to be, and more diverse and liberal in their political orientations. Uh, Looks like Buckeyes maybe had some issues joining. I will continue the discussion though. Hopefully he can rejoin back in. Buckeye, you're still there in the background? I will let you know see if he joins. But I will go back to what I was just saying. Orange County is a perfect example of this. It is a perfect example. Orange County used to be a very Republican column. Okay, his Wi-Fi cut out. Going back to that Orange County example, though, as I was just saying, Orange County used to be a very safe. Oh, he's back. Okay,
I don't know what happened. Cut out for a second, but I'm back.
it's okay. Some of that Ohio Wi-Fi coming back again. But I was just discussing American Sequel's prediction of Orange County is a perfect example of what I was just talking about. And you want to go into some more detail on that?
Oh yeah, Orange County. It's outside of LA, correct?
Yes.
Oh, is
Outside of
it
LA
that one
County.
county that's like barely for Biden, just south of LA?
Yeah, by like 1 point, I believe.
Yeah, that one. Oh yeah. Well, I don't know. There's not much to say about it, but yeah, I agree. That's pretty much an accurate representation of just suburban America as a whole. You prosper, and you're in more or less a conservative setting, and you prosper, and then you got all the liberals who show up and bring it to the left, and that's happened in a lot of good states. So I think that Orange County is definitely a very good example of what we're seeing across suburban America.
Definitely, there are lots of examples of this happening as early as the 1980s. Um, Cook County is a very good example of this. I believe it was one of the first states, and probably New York and a bunch of other New England states, where the ancestrally Republican suburbs that we just mentioned began to turn away from the Republicans in the 1980s. And Illinois was the first state to fall in a long domino as we saw the suburbs of Cook County switch from being heavily Republican in the past to being heavily Democratic now, and basically characterizing the whole state as a safe blue
Hello.
state. Hello? Let's go back one.
Red Texan politics. Hello.
I was at Cyber Politics stream, then I disabled the chat, so I left.
Nice.
ATC's back, I think, as well.
We were just discussing the suburbs and how
Yeah.
they're away from Republicans. They're actually the main bane of our existence at the moment, currently in the political sphere. Williamson County, Texas is actually a great example of this happening. Red Politics. Did you mute your background? It's kind of noisy.
I have my
You could
bad
have-
mic. Yeah, my other mic isn't working.
Okay, try to lower that volume for me.
I'll just mute myself.
Okay, that's
I just
fine.
wanted to say hi.
That's fine. If you get it working, you can come back. But Williamson County used to be a very heavily Republican county out of right outside of Austin. And it very characterizes this trend we've seen of these ancestrally white Republican suburbs that used to be, yeah, DuPage is because of Obama. I would agree with that as well. That was also trending left because the suburbs of Cook County are just not as demographically favorable to us, is the best way to say it. And also, educational trends did not help us in the Cook County metro area, which basically cost us the state of Illinois. entirely.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Hopefully it'll be a little bit
I
better.
hear you.
I mean, you probably will hear an echo, so I'll probably stay muted most of the time.
Would you like to add anything to that, Buckeye?
What?
I mean, yeah, I pretty much agree with what you said. If you look at my one video on the Illinois, like I make time lapse videos, and I did one on Illinois. I was shocked to see that Cook County and all that near Chicago was deep red at one point. It was kind of flipped. A lot of the northern counties, where the suburban, were actually blood red, while a lot of the more rural southern counties were deep blue. I mean, it makes sense now. I don't believe in a southern strategy, but still, you can't deny there was some changing. But anyway, the point is that Cook County, Chicago area, it trended very far to the left, mostly in like the early 1900s, like 1920s. I think a little after Teddy Roosevelt, and I think we're pretty much everything we've said so far is exactly why that is. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that if it's very noticeable if you look at like election results.
True. When you look at past maps of states like Illinois, Cook County used to go red a lot, and that was mostly because the center of Chicago wasn't necessarily Republican. It was because their suburbs in Cook County, those used to be super heavily really red, and that's why Cook County could go red, and that's why it cannot go red anymore. It's the same reason why
Yep.
a bunch of other states cannot do that either. It's because the suburbs are basically they just have this newfound power over states like Nebraska. You look at Omaha and the suburb and shift there as well.
Nebraska second.
Yeah, Nebraska second district. And there probably
Georgia
was
especially, I feel like.
Oh yeah, Georgia. Let's talk about Georgia. That was in the thumbnail of this video. Georgia, the great state of Georgia. Yeah, what's there to say about Georgia? Yeah. Did you want to add something to that, Red Texan?
Sorry, I was getting something. What were you saying?
Oh, you were just talking about Georgia and.
Yeah. That's okay. My mic's just not working. I'm probably gonna leave.
Okay.
Bye.
That's true that Cook County is trending red, but it doesn't matter. Even if Cook County went red, the suburbs alone, and you wouldn't get enough.
Yeah,
Cook
there
County
was
to win. Sorry, go ahead.
There was something that I read that said that every 20 seconds, Chicago, or I think it was Cook County, loses one person. So population is decreasing in Cook County. So I think it could go red, but it would take a while. And even if it does eventually go red, if you look at the trends, a lot of the other parts of Illinois, like Peoria, Bloomington,
Springfield.
those kind of suburbs near on the St. Louis side, yeah, Springfield, they all trended heavy to the left. And even when you look at the counties just outside of Cook County, you kind of mentioned this, American populace, but yeah, Cook County trended 2 points red, but all the counties around it that are the suburbs of Chicago, Lake County, Illinois, trended 4 points blue. DuPage County, Illinois, trended 4 points blue. Will County, Illinois, trended 2 points blue. Kane County trended 4 points blue. So even if we do flip Cook County, would it really matter? Because it's one, it's losing population, and two, all the suburbs around it are trending to the left. So that's why I kind of have a black pill on Illinois possibly being a swing state.
Yeah, right. I agree with that. The reason why Illinois is getting more close is because it's just losing so much population in the Chicago metro area.
Yeah.
And also downstate as well. It's losing a lot of people statistically and the census data. Well, let's discuss Georgia right now because that's the more interesting state and a more case.
Yeah.
To look at our suburbs. Let's crack open the case of Georgia. And let's not talk about 2020 election, everything that went on there. We all know what happened. I can't say that on YouTube, unfortunately. But let's discuss the suburbs more broadly. So since 2012, the Atlanta metro area, and specifically Gwinnett and Cobb, I believe it is, which used to be ancestral Republican, at least 50% or
Yes.
60 or more Republicans would get routinely out of those two counties alone in Georgia, flipped blue. I think 2012 was the last time. That was Mitt Romney. He did okay in the suburbs, but they still trended away. And that was a sign of what was to come as early as 2012 in the suburbs. Matter, even if he was an establishment shill, as she was. The suburbs are just trending away. They're not favorable to us anymore. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, demographics. Obviously, that plays a role in some of these more uh, affluent suburbs, I would say, and also in the more white suburbs as well. Is just because they're just so college educated at this point that you can't win them back. That's why you can't win back the Atlanta suburbs, because college educated whites have swung so heavily to the left. Yeah, Cobb is a very cringe county. I believe Cobb County is that majority minority? I think it is.
That sounds right. Yeah.
I think it might be. I'm not sure though. I know Cobb is one of them. DeKalb is also one of them as well. It's also the sense of elitism in the suburbs that has also shifted them away from the Republican Party, broadly speaking, across the entire US. It's the sense that you're part of the upper class, the upper echelons of power, I guess, and they want to feel like they're a part of the elites when they're not. Obviously, they will never be part of the elites, but they have this sense that they do because their college education and more higher income than the uh, rural counties around them, which are more poor on average and not as college educated than them, gives them this false sense of superiority, which I think is something we also haven't, many people don't discuss. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree because although we always you hear people talking about how the left is indoctrinating our children in school. I honestly, yes, they are. It's obvious they're doing that, but I don't personally buy the fact that they can convince entire generations and people of all the same places in life that Republicans are evil. Like it can't just be that they're being taught that in schools. And so I think that that's just sense of elitism. I mean, if you're college educated, it means you probably came from at least some money, and you probably did well. You had to have done well in school, and I'm sure, yeah, I think that sense of elitism definitely plays a role in making the suburbs trend to the left, because I mean, yeah, like I can pretty much completely agree with what you said, because I've always kind of been like not believing the whole kind of establishment esque thing that, oh, they're using the schools to indoctrinate children, which I do believe that to a certain extent, but I feel like it's just that whole it's a little more than that. You got to look deeper.
Yeah, it's multiple factors, not just one. That are contributing to our
Yeah.
downfall in the suburbs. I mean, Montgomery, Ohio is a great example of this. This is a suburb that used to be heavily Republican, but is now Democrat. I believe you might have some knowledge of that.
Yes. That is yes. Oh, so Montgomery, Ohio. Sorry, I was doing
Yes.
something. Yes, that is where the city of Dayton is. Um, it's kind of like I wouldn't necessarily call it completely suburban. I'd say that it's actually I would call it more at least parts of it are pretty like urban actually, because it is where the city of Dayton is. Dayton, for a lot of people who don't, kind of a city, but it's a smaller city, maybe like 100,000 people. So it's similar in size to Youngstown or Akron or Toledo, but yeah. So Dayton in Montgomery County, it's it's pretty. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I wasn't prepared for this, but yeah, it's more urban than most people realize. I personally wouldn't consider it suburban. It definitely has suburbs, but I feel like the reason that it's so far left is because a lot of it is more urbanized, and
Sorry about
I mean,
that.
yeah, it's kind of just got that establishment vibe, I guess. Because I have been there like a few times, so I feel like, yeah, it's definitely more urban than I would consider it suburban. But yeah, I don't know. I would consider
Okay,
it more urban than part of the
I thought it
suburbs,
was
but
more a suburban county, but I know it used to be a fairly Republican county
it is.
until recently.
It's always kind of. It's been Dayton growing. I mean, Trump won it in 2016, and then he lost it 2020 by pretty thin margins. Then I think Obama won it both times, but I'm not completely sure.
Okay, now that we have discussed the history of the suburbs and why, for the most part, they're turning away from Republican. Oh, let me get to the last reason why. The coalitions have
They
changed. So,
more suburban county in Ohio.
so like the suburbs of like Cincinnati would be a more pronounced example of that. The
I think
suburbs
more
of
or less the
Hamilton
suburbs of
County.
Columbus, actually, in Delaware County.
Okay, Delaware County is a more better example.
Yeah, it's because it used to be pretty heavily Republican. I've been there a lot of times. It's pretty nice. It's your traditional suburb. There's not much else to say, and it used to be pretty Republican. I don't think it was like an overwhelmingly deep red county, but it was Republican, and it swung roughly. Let's see, it swung
I know it swung heavily to the left.
8 points to the left, and yeah, it swung 8 points to the left. It in 2016, Trump won it with 54. Trump won it with 54% of the vote to Clinton's 39% of the vote. And in 2020, Trump didn't actually lose a lot of votes. He got 53% of the vote, but Biden got 46% of the vote. So I feel so. A lot of that is actually like I'd say more or less new voters turning out, or just people who were more establishment esque types. Maybe a lot of never Trumpers probably live there, and I think that's the big issue we have with the suburbs is Trump's rhetoric. I guess it's although I agree with a lot of it, it's definitely being used against us in places like the suburbs because a lot of people there honestly would probably agree with Trump if the mainstream media and the establishment and the elites didn't paint him as this crazy far right candidate. Because I mean, if you look at the suburbs, a lot of them, as at least in Ohio and what I've seen, are very family oriented. And I'm assuming Delaware County is no exception. I've never lived there, so I couldn't tell you for sure, but I'm sure it's no exception. And there's not a lot of votes out in Delaware County. There's maybe like 150,000 in the entire county, but still, the fact that it is suburbs of Columbus did trend 8 points to the left is something we need to look at. And I would not be surprised if in the future it maybe even goes blue just because it's trending to the left.
Yeah, I would agree with you. What you said there. Let me get to my final reason why Trump is the main reason. No, Trump isn't the main reason. He's uh he's a catalyst, I guess, for the trends that were already there in the background that weren't pronounced as they were in 2012. 2012, Mitt Romney did pretty well in the suburbs. I think we could all agree with that. Except in Atlanta, he didn't do as well.
Yeah.
In Gwinnett and Cobb County, I believe it was. But the suburbs have just been turning away from the Republican coalition, mainly because the coalitions have changed. So if you don't know, a quick history lesson. The Republican Party used to be the party of the elites. That's why when you look at elections of the past, Republicans could win the cities and the suburbs way more easily than they do now because they are way more populist and right wing than they were in the past. And the bases have shifted, and now the Republican Party's base is the more working class, populist, rural base, and the Democrat Party is the party of the elites. And as that swap has occurred, the coalition change has occurred with it. And so I think that's why we're seeing these reverberations now.
Yeah, I
What do
think
you
that's a
think,
pretty
though?
good analysis on what's happening because no, I agree. That's a very good analysis on what's happening because I mean, I don't think there was a I certainly don't believe there was a southern strategy, but I certainly do think that there was a Trump strategy of some sorts, and if we could have just kept those those suburban voters in a lot of these states, then Georgia would probably have stayed red. I mean, we would have the Republican Party would have absolutely dominated if it could have kept those white suburbanites and gained those newfound populist votes in rural counties. But yeah, I do agree with your analysis on how, as being a party of the elite, of at least the Republicans back a long time ago, is why they won the suburbs. And I do believe that there is some sort of like "I'm better than you" maybe feeling. I don't can't think of the proper term in the suburbs
Probably a
of a lot of
mindset's a
places
better
in America
term.
because a lot of yeah, probably mindset would be the best way to describe it as just being elitist. Because I mean, if you, a lot of them probably have families, they watch the news, they work 9 to 5 jobs, and I mean that's kind of seen as the whole. I don't want to say American dream, but when you think of a lot of people think of America, that's what they think of, and these people, it's just Trump couldn't. They did vote Republican, but now that I feel like the mainstream media and the way that they portray Trump has a lot more to do with these trends than most people believe. But that's just my take. But I think what we can both most likely agree on is that the suburbs are trending away because of the parties slowly but surely switching demographics, maybe would be the proper term, or policies. But we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, I would agree. It's probably a combination of both of them. How are we going to win an election without the suburbs? So that's the black pill, but we'll discuss that in the future. But we'll just for now talk about the white pill for now. So, as we mentioned, there's been a lot of suburban shift to the left. We all know that. The media gloats about it all the time. They write these articles like Northern Virginia turned Virginia from a deep red state to a solid blue state, and they brag about this stuff all the time. And that's them showing off that they have the power over you because they control the institutions of the college, all the corporations on their side, ultimately. And that's why the culture is moving to the left. But to your point about how are we going to win an election without the suburbs, I mean, you kind of can't. You need the suburbs. You at least need a big chunk of them, probably at least over 50%. That's how you keep Texas, Florida,
Yeah.
and North Carolina. If you don't win those states, you're done. It's over. Once Texas goes, it's over.
Yeah.
And what do you
If you
think,
look at
though?
the map, even if in
Go ahead.
my bad, I thought you were done. If you look at like an electoral map on YapMS or 270, whatever you use, doesn't matter. Um, even if in let's say 2024, the Republicans win and maybe they pick Arizona and Georgia back up, if but they lose Texas, I believe I'm doing the map real quickly just to double check, but I have done this before that they are dead in the water because Texas is just that.
Yeah, it just has that many electoral votes. It doesn't matter
Well,
if we won the entire Rust Belt, it still wouldn't matter if we
yes.
lost Texas. It's our California, basically. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, if pretty much, yeah. if the Republicans won every state in the Rust Belt and they flipped Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and New Hampshire, they would only win by like 5 electoral votes. I just did the math.
Yeah, and
So
Texas is continuously growing.
let's say in
So
24, Trump flips 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Even if Trump flips all 8 other swing states, he loses Texas. He only barely wins.
yeah, that's the bitter black pill of the suburbs. That's why we lost Georgia, and that's why I made a video about how Georgia's lost to us ultimately, because it's not recoverable, the situation there. It's only going to get worse because the suburbs grow insanely. I don't know. I think the Atlanta suburbs are some of those fastest growing metro area in the country.
Yeah. Yeah. Atlanta from like 2012 to now, just like less than 10 years, maybe in 2015 now, it's grew so much and they changed so much. They like pretty conservative, I believe, back in like the beginning of last decade, but
Yeah, they shifted away, unfortunately. And that's why we lost the state. Unfortunately, it's the same reason why we don't win in Illinois. Because if a newcomer, someone who doesn't understand politics as well as we do, looks at Illinois and Georgia, the majority of the counties are red. The majority of the state is red. But the problem is that these metro areas have just so much of the population doesn't matter. Like the entire state of Illinois could vote red except for Cook County and its suburbs. It still doesn't matter. It's the same thing in Georgia.
yeah, it's
But let's get in some diamonds in the rough here. Let's get into some more white pilling stuff. So we've talked about the suburbs, the black pill of that. But let's talk about a white pill for now, because we need white pills in our community. I think we could all agree on that.
we sure do.
Right. So not every suburb is the same.
Yeah,
Not all of them are
we do.
growing, becoming as diverse. I'll use that term as they are in Georgia and uh, Texas and a couple other states. There are some diamonds in the rough. Montgomery, Texas is a great example. It's still an insanely Republican suburb of Houston. It's still fairly working class, and Macomb County, Michigan, is another example of a suburb that's still fairly Republican now, and which helps us have a chance in these states and improve our position and maybe expand in those states as well as we grow. If we can improve our margin in the suburbs, those working class, more white, non college educated suburbs. It's the reason why North Carolina is still Republicans, because the suburbs are not as diverse and college educated, more importantly, as they are in Georgia, as I discussed in my most recent video about North Carolina. What do you think, though? You there, Buckeye? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost you there for a second. All right, sorry about that, guys. Looks like he's having some technical problems. You back?
Sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out again.
That's okay. We all have boomer problems. It's all right.
Yeah,
As we
so
discuss, we're talking about
Okay.
the white pill about the suburbs.
Yeah, well, I think that fact is that not all suburbs are the same. Because if you look at like when a lot of people think of the suburbs, they probably think like the suburbs you think of Atlanta, outside of Chicago, outside of LA, parts of Texas. that they're just like houses next to each other, and a lot of people that live. It's pretty much a city, just a little more spread out, and the people live in homes. To be honest with you, but there's a lot of suburbs that aren't really like that. For example, I pretty much live in a suburb of kind of Cleveland, Akron. It's kind of suburban, but it's also kind of rural. And we are actually growing in population. A lot of people don't know this, but parts of Ohio are actually growing in population. The housing market is crazy near where I live, but we're actually growing more conservative. So my county actually trended, and my precinct actually went right, I believe. Let me just double check that. Yes, we went right. It was small margins, but we did go right, and that's same with a couple counties in like Wisconsin and Michigan. 2020 was kind of an outlier, but if you look at like Senate races in 2016 and like the national environment, then a lot of counties near Scranton, joke town. I say hometown in quotations. Allen, Pennsylvania, a lot of places in like white working class Pennsylvania, kind of near the New Jersey border, north of Philadelphia. They're considered suburbs, but I would not consider them. In my book, they're not suburbs. They're white working class people who just happen to kind of live in suburban settings. And I would not. And Republicans if they keep up their messaging to the white working class, then they will continue to win these suburbs over. So a lot of the counties you see on the New Jersey border north of Philadelphia could very soon be red counties and red suburbs. And I think that brings us to the big difference between suburbs, at least some of them, and that is that there's a huge difference between suburban Atlanta, suburban, I don't know, Seattle, suburban, I don't know, Denver, I don't know, I'm just naming cities, and suburban Cleveland, suburban Milwaukee, suburban maybe even Iowa, parts of Iowa, and maybe even suburban like Jacksonville, places like that. A lot of the states that the Republicans are making gains in, the suburbs are trending right. So, I mean, why that is, that's a good question. But I think it's just interesting when you look at places that are considered suburban. A lot of places that Republicans are expected to do well in the future, a lot of the suburbs in those states are trending right, while a lot of the suburbs in other places in the Republicans lose ground in, such as Georgia, such as Arizona to a certain extent. I think Arizona is still a swing state and still in play, but even Arizona to a certain extent. Virginia, you mentioned that before. A lot of suburbs in those places are trending left, and if think it like it all comes down to the kind of suburb because there's a huge difference between people who are white working class and live in a suburban setting versus people who have college degrees and live in a suburban setting.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there as to why some of the suburbs are still on our side and are not becoming insane. I guess is a better term to describe some of them. Because when you go down some of these suburbs,
Yeah,
it just is insane with the amount of progressivism you see everywhere. I mean, Fairfax County, Virginia. What's this? What's a suburb of Colorado? I forgot the name of the county, but there used to be this county in Denver. It's insane now. And yeah, they're all fairly college educated. The majority probably college educated, I would say. They're not very working class. They're very upper middle class would be the best term to describe them. And probably more elites too. I would say fairly rich people than like the suburbs of Pittsburgh.
yeah, totally. Suburbs of where I live. It's so weird. You drive up to like parts of like suburban Cleveland, at least the west side. Like no one's gonna know where this is, but if you look at a map, Lakewood, Elyria, Westlake, and you drive up to those places and you see all these Biden Harris signs, pride flags, we believe signs. But then you go to like suburbs in near Akron in Summit County, at least south of Akron, and southern Akron, parts of Youngstown, even kind of suburban where I live. I kind of live in a more rural area, but it's still relatively suburban. It's still considered the suburbs, but no one here really considers themselves suburban because we are part of that white working class suburbs, kind of near Akron. But I think my point is that if you look at the college education in a lot of places near Cleveland, at least West Side, they're college educated whites. Well, a lot of people nearby, down by me, there actually are quite a few people with college educations, but the majority don't have a college education. And I think that's the big difference between Cleveland and where I live.
Yeah, it's the amount of the institutions that are just frankly are not on our side and have successfully indoctrinated people is probably the main determinant, as well as if they're working class or more upper middle class.
Yeah. Like I'd say we'd probably be pure middle class to lower middle class, while a lot of people on the west side of Cleveland are more upper middle class.
Yeah, and this trend isn't just for the big cities, it's for the, well, I wouldn't say just big cities, but I would say cities in red states as well. When you look at Arkansas, Missouri, when you look at the suburbs of St. Louis, it's probably not a great example, but suburbs of Boise, you still see some trends
Kansas.
to the left. Yeah, Kansas too. Nebraska, that's another one. We saw that in 2020. You still see some of these suburbs that are fairly working class. Like I would say Omaha is fairly working class. It's not a very, I don't know. What do you think about Omaha? Omaha is a
It's not
fairly
over.
interesting case.
Omaha is really interesting because it's, well, first of all, the way that the Nebraska governor gerrymandered it in 2010 in the beginning of the last decade was completely horrible. They kind of like did the opposite of what they intended to do, and if that was the intent to give. I mean, if they intended to make it more fair, I guess that would be. I guess they did a decent job, but I mean that's kind of cringe. I mean, you look at we. I think it's funny to not to get off topic, we get all the hate for gerrymandering, but look at Connecticut, look at Maryland, look at a lot of other states that are just completely gerrymandered to benefit Democrats. But anyway, Omaha, I'm not really well versed in the demographics there, so I'm not going to speak about that. Or really, I don't. I just think it's kind of an anomaly, to be honest. I mean, like you said, that a whole elitism. Even if Omaha is more white working class and is more, you would think, favorable for the Republicans, compared to the rest of Nebraska, which is mostly farmers and people who, even though they may share the same term as blue collar, a lot of people in Omaha still might be making a little more money, and maybe just it's a whole local vibe and mentality. It's more localized than people in like Atlanta, but I do think I am gonna have to do some research on Omaha. Maybe our next video can be about Nebraska and Omaha. If we do a stream again, we can talk about that. But I do think it's a interesting anomaly.
Definitely, it's a fairly interesting case. I just looked up the demographics of Omaha. Omaha is 77% white, 12% black, and 3% Asian.
That's not. That's a little more. That's still pretty white. It's not. It's a little more diverse than I think where I live and most white working class suburbs. But it's still. It's about this. It's about even with I think the national like percentage. It's pretty much because I think it's like 13% African American. So I do. So it's pretty similar, I think, to the rest of the nation.
Definitely, probably is similar to the national average. Thoughts on Bergen County, New Jersey? I'm not very versed in New
Yeah, I don't know
Jersey
where that is.
politics. New Jersey is a very cringe state. But I will discuss Florida because I am from there and I understand the politics of that state more
I thought you're from North
directly.
Carolina.
No, I'm originally from Florida. I just moved here actually a couple months ago.
Oh, okay. I think you mentioned that in the North Carolina video, but I thought you meant like you moved from another part of North Carolina. Okay, my bad.
Omaha is 68% non-Hispanic white. Oh, is that including the Hispanics in that census data? Okay, it might be it's 68% non-Hispanic, but some of those Hispanic groups are fairly conservative as well.
Yeah.
Now I'm just answering this guy in the chat real quick. But since we discussed the suburbs and we got that out of the way, do you want to discuss the situation in Afghanistan before we head out? You there?
Sure. I thought you were going to discuss Florida, but if you want to discuss
Oh,
Afghanistan,
hang on. Yeah. Let me. Sorry, I got track. I was sidetracked. Florida is a
okay.
very
Are we just
interesting case. So let me finish Florida first before we do that.
yeah?
Florida, we obviously have base Ron in office. Obviously, fairly great state, I would say, except for the weather. The summer is fairly terrible. But the suburbs are actually, when you look at them, it would seem demographically that they're not favorable to Republicans, but they're actually more favorable than you would think upon first glance. The suburbs of Orlando are actually fairly conservative. They shifted left, obviously, in 2020, but they're still fairly working class and middle class, I would say, except the more upper middle class ones. Jacksonville, Nassau County, I believe it is the suburb of Jacksonville. It's fairly working class and middle class, I would say, and that's why the suburb and Miami-Dade. Well, no, the suburbs of Miami-Dade are actually fairly different. Those are where millionaires live. That's why, and fairly college educated as well. That's why those Broward and West Palm Beach are safe Democrat counties in Florida. Same thing goes for Tallahassee, I would say as well, even though it doesn't matter as much as Tampa and Orlando and Miami-Dade do. But all right, since I have Florida out of the way, let's discuss Afghanistan.
This is. I had my eyes glued to my TV and my phone yesterday.
I know, it's mere images of Saigon, 1970s.
I tweeted about this yesterday, but I gotta read it just because we're on the topic. I
You can
think
share the tweet if you want. Share on the
I'll
screen.
just read it. It's fine. But it was an article that CNN put. I think it was CNN put out, or maybe I just found it, and it said that a month before the Taliban arrived in Kabul, Joe Biden had rejected the comparison, stating that the Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army. There's going to be no circumstance for you where you are going to see people being lifted off the roof of an embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. And then it's put a picture of the helicopter that landed on the embassy yesterday. But I think that's a perfect example of what happened, just pure incompetency and failure.
Failure and the United States not learning the lesson of not spreading global hobo. Well, our military leaders are too busy doing that.
Yeah.
But my gosh, the situation in Afghanistan has just been
It's a
if you
disaster.
followed it as long as, yeah, it's a disaster would be the best way to describe it. So let me give you a background for those who don't know. A couple months ago, I think it was, the Taliban started gaining more ground than they had before. I believe they had like 30% of the country while we were still there. I think. Don't quote me
That
on that,
sounds
but it
right.
was something around there. Yeah, it was something around that. And so as soon as Trump, well, the policy he wanted to sign to get rid of the troops, and we left. Sorry, left. Had difficulty in words today. They obviously started gaining ground, obviously, because there's no army opposing them. And so I remember a couple months ago that a bunch of these media outlets kept saying, oh, we don't need to worry about the U.S. withdrawal. The Afghan army is actually fairly competent, and they have American weapons, and Kabul is not going to fall. Trust me, I'm a journalist. They said that actually, Kabul is not going to fall for years. That's what this guy said. And so fast forward weeks later, and they start like capturing like 50%. Then it goes to 80. And then what happened yesterday, they enter Kabul, and it's basically over at that point. So $50 billion or whatever, how much it is, in American lives wasted. Spread democracy. liberal democracy, guys. Was it worth it? Of course not. And so that's what happens when you have neocons and a military who's more concerned about global homo than they are about protecting our southern border and Americans. But yeah, do you have anything to add to that?
No, you hit the nail right on the head. It's our military is just going to hell in a handbasket right now. I think we still have 6,000 troops at the airport trying to get people out. I don't know. I haven't checked in a few hours, but so that may have changed. But I mean, it's our military is more focused on appealing to Twitter girls than it is trying to win the next war and make sure that we don't lose uh, thousands of soldiers.
True, our military could not win a war right now.
Probably not, to be honest. It would take huge amounts of planning and pretty much a total revamp of a lot of our specific branches and ranks, and it would take a whole shakedown of the military.
Yeah, we have to like sack Mark Milley. He needs to go. Like
Yeah.
basically the entire political class of the military.
We need to drain
That-
the swamp of the U.S. military.
I wish we could do that, but those institutions are firmly on the left side and control.
They
And
actually
the long
did.
march through the institutions.
They did kind of work with Trump, though. I believe. Keyword kind of, but
Yeah, I mean, after seeing what happened to the military on January 6th, and them tweeting out about how we're comparable to the guys we fought in World War II, and how they kicked out members of the military who did not support Biden's legitimate election that had no voter fraud. Guys,
of course.
100% secure, the most secure election in history. I will ban you if you say otherwise. And they purge the military out of actual opposition. I mean, it just goes to show you who the military actually hates and actually fights for. They
Well,
are
a lot of
just an
them are in
institution.
bed
Sorry,
with
go
the
ahead.
Democrats. A lot of them are in bed with the Democrats and the elite and the establishment. When you think about it,
Yeah, the military is just a tool for global harmony.
Yep.
Nothing more. Basically, in summary, don't join the military. Red staters.
I'm still
Because-
waiting for John Doyle's video on that.
I know, I can't wait for his video on that as well. He needs to make more videos.
He does. He never uploads. And then he says he is, then he doesn't.
Yeah, and then 5 years later, we're still waiting. But closing out, any closing statements you want to add, Buckeye, before we close out the stream today?
Pretty much that. This stream was kind of a black pill. I don't think it was intended to be, but just looking at the data, it kind of was, and at least in my opinion. But I mean, we got to stay optimistic and we got to keep fighting because I do believe that in the end we are going to win. We just got to put the effort in. So, thank you for watching.
In the end, we win. We have gotten our side. That's all that matters.
We sure do.
That's one thing the progressives don't have.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for joining, and have a wonderful day.